On-Screen Manitoba is an innovative membership-driven association that leads, builds, and represents the Manitoba screen-based industry.
Just on the, with the financing, emerging opportunities, digital platforms. I mean, obviously, you're using, emerging digital platforms in the production with the small camera and keeping the crew small. Do you feel, or do you think that these emerging platforms helped in other ways to just, realize the project in the vacuum of, the traditional?
Well, I think that any filmmaker that has a film has to start getting their audience before they even have started making the movie. I mean, with Moonpoint, we started a Facebook page and building an audience before we even started shooting. That audience kept building throughout the production, and we did all kinds of different things through the production to keep building the audience. So when the movie eventually was going to come out, we already had built a significant audience with that, and people kept saying, when is it coming out? When's it coming out? When's the DVD coming out? When's it going on TV? We had people send us pictures all along the way, like if somebody was on an airplane and they saw the movie, they sent us a picture of the little still from the little screen on the Air Canada plane and posted on our Facebook page. I mean, people kept talking about it, and Sean did some video blogging that got people interested more in the film, and we used social media huge to market the movie. I believe that, as a distributor now, that conventional marketing, you throw it out the window. The whole newspaper ad, TV ad, radio ad thing, that's a waste of money. 90% of your audience is going to come from what they know and hear on the internet. We would poll people after screenings and ask them, how did you find out about the film? It was through the internet. It was through our websites. It was through... You couldn't go on the internet and talk about Canadian films and not stumble at the time when we were getting close to releasing the film, and you would always stumble on our film, and that's important. I think that you have to do whatever you can to get your audience in as many ways as you can, and we did little special, things along the way to get people interested about our film, like Art Hindle, who's a renowned Canadian actor, plays this recovering alcoholic in the movie, and there's a scene in the movie where he's dressed up in a banana suit. Well, Art Hindle stood at Yonge and Dundas handing out postcards for our movie in a banana suit. I mean, you got to think outside the box. I mean, when I was growing up as a kid in Edmonton and I was working for Canadian Odeon Theatres, every time big movie would come out, or a movie period, we would find different ways of encouraging people to come to see the film. We'd have contests or whatever like that. Going to see a movie back when I was growing up was an event. It's not an event anymore. And what we found in Moonpoint is we made it an event. And we sold merchandise, T-shirts, CDs, autographed posters at the screenings. People would... one lady came in and spent over $100 on merchandise, and she hadn't even seen the film yet. I mean, distributors don't do that. Filmmakers don't do that. These are the kinds of things you have to do, in my opinion, to be successful. And as far as digital, absolutely, the internet and the technologies of how you shoot a movie today is so much different. It's so less expensive to make films today that the world's your oyster if you choose to go after it.
So, I mean, in one way, what in your approach and what you're kind of saying, and it's approach that my production company is EyeSteelFilm in Montreal, which is documentary feature films, and it's totally in the same spirit. It's kind of like a DIY, do-it-yourself type process, because on one level, it's like you started a distribution company, but if you approach a traditional distribution company, they want to know your budget for prints and ads and stuff like this. What's the money you have to put into the campaign? They'll match it maybe to attract theaters and stuff. So it's you need to speak a different language and have a completely different attitude in this kind of model. And I'm wondering how you're finding with the Royal Bank and its tradition of working with bigger projects and changes going on and, you know, telefilm and stuff about where the money goes and envelope systems. Are you seeing, I don't know, change in demand or new requests like this crowdsourcing type financing coming across, pushing the Royal Bank to perhaps advance new models? Or do you have just even brainstorming ideas about it if you take off your hat, but you utilize some of your experience to think into the future?
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned, it's an entire team within RBC that deals with nothing more than what they commonly refer to as knowledge-based industries, which includes the media and entertainment piece. And it's always being reevaluated on what's acceptable or what isn't acceptable for us to dabble into. And certainly I've seen quite recently a very aggressive approach to the marketing of film. I was at an amazing documentary called Champion City, and it was about the first Stanley Cup parade in Winnipeg. And this movie was a documentary.
Old movie.
Well, it was right. It was shot in, for about $75,000, and the marketing machine went full bore into having a premiere event. I expected to kind of show up and find 15, 20 people in a room. I was delighted to see Mark Chipman, who with obviously one of the owners of the Winnipeg Jets, and a few of the players and the general manager at the screening. Not sure if anybody here is a big hockey fan, but they had the Don Cherry guys there that were on. They all dress up like Don Cherry. They were all there. It was just an absolutely fabulous event. I was quite awestruck at the amount of attention that they had gotten through these various social media aspects, and it turned into just an unbelievable event. And the traction you get from that is fabulous. And I think for anybody who's just making money based on a project per project basis, when you add into your model as a business some sort of way to continue to benefit nicely on recurring revenue and recurring dollars, it's great. The bank has seen, and usually the way the bank plays is we finance productions, we don't finance producers. And it's now getting to a point where we're seeing a lot of different lines of revenue that producers are being able to add to their value, which means obviously then we can maybe start help funding producers themselves and using that sort of recurring revenue to allow a jump start to projects instead of constantly going hat around a room or possibly a crowdsourcing. It's wonderful to see the industry change like that, and it's to me it's been very quick. I've not seen that sort of aggressive marketing like I did up until this Champion City thing. It was unbelievable.
Are there any questions just now before we? You're so polite. Yes, good, Mary.
So, just two things actually. One thing I wanted to say about RBC. One good thing about RBC in our experience is with low budget films, if the financing is firm and and it's coming from people that they feel confident in, they've been pretty good about trying to work with us to keep things like application fees and things like that reasonable, which in the past has been a big problem because when you've got a really low budget, you can't spend a lot of money on financing. That was just one thing I wanted to say. But the other thing I wanted to say to you, Artie, is can you talk about a little bit about, so you've got this model now. How's that going to evolve with your next film? Do you see your next film being done pretty much the same way? Or?
Well, I just got my new film greenlit by Telefilm. The problem is that the budget, which was originally supposed to be 1.25, is now 1, and it may go down to 6, depending if the other funders come in, of which, for the upteenth time, I've had to defer 100% of my fees, and I will never see a penny. Out of the last 10 films I've made, 7 of them I've never gotten paid on. And if that's going to be the case, then I would rather go the route of Moonpoint, where we make it for very small money, and I'm in control of everything. And the project Moonpoint is, to me, the future. I think telefilm 5 to 10 years from now may not exist. I think that the government has to step up and give private investment the ability to want to invest in films. You can't go to a private investor and say, hey, I have this great project. Would you like to invest in my movie? The only problem is that it's 100% risk with no guaranteed rate of return. How do you sell that? You can't. Me as a producer, I don't even get to recoup before telefilm. I have to sit, for every dollar I get, they take 49%, and if there's anybody else that gets to recoup along with me, by the time it'll take me 1,000 years to ever see a nickel. That system doesn't work anymore. The Moonpoint scenario works. We've proved it. Sean and I have another project that we're working on now, which will probably make for about 150,000, and it's going to be awesome. It's based on a Canadian book that I got the rights to, and we're hopefully going to shoot that next year. And I'd much rather that scenario than going through the funding scenario that I'm going through on telefilm, where it's going to be really, really difficult. So I think that being in control of your own project, I mean, Peace Out's another great example. I mean, here's a documentary that Charles and Tina decided they were just going to go do, and they climbed in their camper van and drove to Fort McMurray to shoot this documentary, not knowing what they were going to get. And they made an amazing film for basically $30,000. I mean, it's played all over Canada. We've got an international distributor already. I mean, it's going to play everywhere. And now Charles, Tina, and I are working on the sequel to his next film. So hopefully we're going to shoot it starting in next month. We're not waiting for anything. If we have to wait, we'd just rather keep going ourselves. We just have to, I mean, waiting for funding. I mean, going through telefilm. I did a film back in 2009 called Joe Rodriguez' Hungry Hills. It took 16 years to make that movie. From the time that the screenwriter optioned the book to the time that it actually got made, 16 years. We deferred everything. We got a distributor who didn't release the film in theaters. I'm not eligible for 50 cents from telefilm for development money because of that project. So it doesn't work. Why wait 16 years to make a movie, to reinvest everything and never see a penny, and then nobody sees it?
Avi, when you're doing something like Moonpoint, do you encounter issues with like the unions and stuff, trying to still use your contacts, but yet they're
the thing about the unions is that they have budget levels. So as long as you can prove that you fall under a budget level that is below their minimum, then you don't have any problem. What we did on Moonpoint, though, was we worked under the Actor Tip program, which is specifically designed for extremely low-budget movies up to a total budget of $275,000. And those programs are geared towards short films and low-budget, super low-budget feature films that are made for that little money. And that's what we did for Moonpoint. And I always believe that you need to use union actors. I mean, you want faces that you can put on posters and T-shirts or whatever, and trailers to get people to come and see your movie. And no disrespect to non-union actors, but I think there's a level of performance that you get out of a union actor as opposed to a non-union actor. And so we worked with ACTRA and their people at the TIP program, and we got the thumbs up from them to move forward, and they made sure that we continually fell under their guidelines, and we had to report to them continuously, and it ended up working out really, really right.
Okay, thanks. Stephanie, maybe we'll follow back up with you and some thoughts you might have or other advice.
I mean, I think the biggest lesson here, I mean, in documentary, especially for a really long time, we've been pretty lucky with our funding models. You know, you have got a couple of broadcaster commissions, you throw in a couple of acquisitions, you add on your tax credits, and you've got a complete budget. And it was pretty stable, and we were kind of lucky for a really long time to have that funding model. But it's very rare to be able to fund a film that easily and that quickly anymore. And I think kind of the big lesson is that there are dozens of puzzle pieces, and every project that you have is going to be a different collection of pieces to make up that puzzle. And it's looking at what's right for that project, what's right for that budget, what's right for that subject matter, what's right for that audience, and putting together the best collection you have. And sometimes it's going to be a trade-off. Sometimes certain types of funding won't work well with other types of funding. You know, one of the things, if you are going to go the crowdfunding route, to keep in mind is that it can potentially grind your tax credits. So if you want to use tax credits, then you have to look at how do those two pieces work together. From my understanding, it won't affect, in Manitoba, it won't affect your provincial tax credits, but there hasn't been a judgment yet from the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, on how crowdfunding will affect tax credits. There's, you know, they're kind of, they are talking about it, they know about it. I gave a presentation at the National Tax Credit Committee meeting in the spring, specifically about crowdfunding and the models that are being used. And hopefully very soon there'll be a decision that will come down about whether it will be considered assistance or whether it will be considered sponsorship, or whether it will have to go under the producer's contribution. But there isn't kind of a clear picture yet of how that looks and where that should sit. So it's something to really keep in mind if you're going to go for crowdfunding before that decision is made, that you could end up grinding your tax credits.
Yeah, can I just add to that, because I know some people that have been dealing with the CRA with the crowdfunding. There are ways to get around it for now, is that when people donate to the project, they donate to, let's say you have a single purpose company for your film, don't have them donate that money to that single purpose company. Have them donate it to your production company, like your main production company, and that your production company invests in your film. And there's a way around that. There's a couple of really great tax auditors in Ontario that have dealt with this, that, you know, if you want to ask me, I can probably shoot some information to you. But that's how some people are getting around it right now until the CRA comes down with a final decision.
Yeah, and just something too was we're trying to encourage people not to use donate as a word, because then they might look at it more as assistance. So it's a contribution, it's an equal incentive. They're getting something in exchange of equal value for what they're contributing.
First, Eugene, your question?
You're good?
What's your definition of equal value?
I mean, this is a debate. This was actually a question that the Tax Credit Committee asked me when I was giving the presentation, because, you know, fair market value is what someone's willing to pay for something. So it's hard to say what fair market value is if someone's willing to pay, you know, $100 for your DVD. Well, is that fair market value? It probably isn't, because you wouldn't be selling your DVD for that when your film is finished. So it's just kind of an idea. Take a step back, look at your incentives, look at, if I took my film completely out of the equation and someone was just purchasing this item, this incentive, this whatever it is, what do I think it would be worth? And, you know, and then basically that's just not to say you're giving buttons for $50 contributions. You're not, you know, you've got to keep it kind of in scale. Another really important thing for everyone to keep in mind if you do go the crowdfunding route is do not give away credits of any kind on your film. Do not give away an executive producer credit. Do not give away a producer credit. Do not do that. That is the worst possible thing that you can do for all sorts of reasons. So just don't have that be one of your incentives.
Can they get a thanks?
They can definitely get a thanks. They can get a thanks in the credits, but they shouldn't actually get a credit on your film. It can affect things. It can actually affect your tax credits, because if they're not from Manitoba and they get a credit, then they might be affecting, you know, your labor eligibility. So
Yeah, they're not Canadian, but
yeah,
your tax credit.
exactly. So just if anyone ever mentions doing that, tell them that they should not be giving that away, no matter how big the price is. If they want to come on as an executive producer and they have a large amount of money, then do it properly and make sure you have the proper paperwork for it.
Is this helping us reach beyond Canada and the Canadian borders in terms of finding audience and distributing? And how's it doing that?
Answer the question.
Is this model, are these models helping us expand beyond the Canadian borders, either, you know, with financing or distribution or colleagues?
I mean, I think that what you'll see with crowdfunding is there are some projects that go viral, that, you know, go out into the world. They've got an amazing trailer, they've got an amazing subject matter, and they are raising huge amounts of money, and it's spreading far and wide, and they're really building an international audience. But I think the majority of what you're seeing with most projects is you're working with a very niche audience. So it's people who are very specific to that subject matter, people who are very specific to you, and you're going to grow a little bit. You're going to build a little bit of people outside of that kind of tight circle of your friends and family, your fans, and your subject matters fans. But for the most part, you're not going to build a huge, you know, international audience base. But what you will do is you're going to start your momentum. This project that we had yesterday that closed, it was called Between the Lines, and it was a project about graffiti in Toronto. And just through the process of running their crowdfunding campaign, they got word out all across the city about this project. They attended events. There's this screening event called Open Roof, which is outdoor films. They showed their trailer at a sold-out screening of Open Roof films on last week. They were at this event called Art Battle on Tuesday night, which is, you know, this big artsy, literally battle between two artists, and it's messy, and they use chainsaws, but they were there, and they were part of the event, and they got the word out to all of these people. So even if people aren't contributing to your campaign, even if you're not getting money directly from them, even if everyone doesn't open their wallet for you, the word is spreading, and it's partly just increasing that profile and increasing the momentum of your film before you've really hit the ground running.
I would also suggest in the, in the model that Avi's discussing, that there's a real power in community, and with the tools that are being used, they're global tools, and finding those like-minded producers and that community of creators on, you know, because film is an army of creators that are willing to galvanize this process and step outside of the 16 years to get a film made because of institutional bureaucratic hell, is also really important. Yes?
I just have a small technical question, because you're saying don't have the crowdsourcing, give to the specific project, give it to the producer's company, but producer investment also grinds. So how do you get around that? In the, oh, I see, but then the producer still has to invest in the movie, in a project, to close the financing.
Well, I mean, this is what these people have done. I mean, we haven't done it that way, but I think that, there's a lot of pressure on the CRA to come up with a decision because of the number of shows that are starting to use crowdsourcing, especially in the documentary world. I mean, there's a lot of documentaries that I know of in Canada that are using crowdsourcing to raise money for their docs. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of right now that are films, docs that are in development right now. I can think of at least a dozen that are using Indiegogo for the most part to raise money.
Did you have any advice about all this producers and grindings and tax credits from Lawrence, from your experience of the right way of doing it, or you don't know?
No idea.
Me and Lawrence have no idea. Yes, right up front here.
I just had a question about Doc Ignite. Do you get the money that you raise even if you don't reach your goal?
Yeah, we decided early on when we started doing the research on crowdfunding and looking at the numbers that one of the most important things to us was, we want all of these projects to be successful. So the first thing we decided was that they would get their financing or their amount that they've raised regardless of it if they meet their goal. We do follow the same model that Indiegogo has as kind of an incentive for people to push and work a little harder. So we do take a small service charge just to cover our administrative costs, and it's 4% if you meet your goal and 8% if you don't. The other thing I should mention that Hot Docs does, which is different than the other places, is we actually add to the incentives. So we can do things like we have a cinema, the Hot Docs Bloor Hot Docs Cinema, which is, we think, the only cinema in the world that's dedicated exclusively to documentary programming. And one of the things we can do is we can let you have a sneak peek screening, private screening of your film at the cinema when it's completed, and you can offer an invite to that screening as one of your incentives. We can offer 2-for-1 tickets to our cinema or to our festival as one of your incentives. We can offer box sets of our Hot Docs DVD sets as incentives. So we have a bunch of things that we can do to add so that hopefully there's not as much out of pocket for producers. I mean, the other thing that's really important to look at is what's the actual cost to you as a producer of these incentives that you're giving out. Because, you know, you really want to think about things like mailing costs. Do everything you can to avoid having to mail stuff, especially internationally. So you want to look at what kind of incentives can you offer to people that aren't costing you an arm and a leg to fulfill, because you actually want to make a profit. You should be looking at not spending more than 30% of your total revenue on fulfilling these incentives, your revenue from the crowdfunding.
I have a question for Lawrence. If crowdfunding is part of your financing scenario, would RBC accept that amount as a producer investment until that funding comes in and the producers can put that money into the film? What kind of proof would you need from the producers of that investment ahead of time?
From a vantage point of saying, if you had confirmed funds sitting in an account somewhere waiting to be injected into a project, confirmation would be a bank balance, really. There's not much more we could get from anybody on that. We'd probably lock it up in a sort of a short-term investment scenario so that we could ensure that the money goes where it's supposed to go and when it's supposed to go in.
Wouldn't take like a mortgage on their house or like that?
No, we tend not to want to get into those types of arrangements where the risk is so great that we're now asking producers to come forward with their personal property. We really try to shy away from that.
Merritt?
I just have a question in terms of structuring the crowdfunding, because in some ways it feels almost like what you could do, especially someone like you, Abby, is have it go to the distribution company, and then have the distribution company give it as an advance, right?
Yeah.
And then you're in a situation where it kind of meets you don't have to worry in the same way about
Yeah,
the
but
tax
find a
credits.
distributor other than IndieCan Entertainment that's willing to do that. That's the problem. I think you need to keep it as a completely separate entity in some way, shape, or form until the CRA comes up with a plan. Maybe it's an aunt that's willing to, be the sort of to accept the money or whatever. I mean, before you do it, you should talk to somebody who is very familiar with tax credit auditing and the CRA and how they're playing with it before you push the button.
But have you tried that? I'm just curious, is anybody running that model through CRA?
OMDC, who oversees the tax credits in Ontario, I've been kind of in close touch with Jennifer Blitz there, who kind of manages that program. And I talked to her last week in advance of this panel because I wanted to see if there were any updates from CRA. And she'd just been in touch with Cavco, and she said that there's still no ruling from them. And then I asked her, do you know how it's showing up so far, how CRA is ruling when crowdfunding is in someone's budget? And she said that basically what's happened is no one so far who's had crowdfunding listed in their budget openly has been audited. So it hasn't really been treated at all yet. So I don't know if the ruling will come when a film comes up that gets audited that has it, and that will be the thing that they'll make them decide one way or another. But it's just, it hasn't really even been dealt with yet at CRA. They're aware of the issue. They're trying to decide how they're going to come down, but it hasn't even come up yet.
On a different note, it's just yeah. Go ahead.
Have you done crowdfunding?
Me.
Yeah, has EyeSteel done any crowdfunding?
Only for Homeless Nation, which was a website that dealt with homeless people as members who created their own profiles across the country. We did it back in the day a few years ago. Before we did it through GiveMeaning.org, which I don't even know if it's still open out of Vancouver. Most of these crowdsourcings weren't open yet, so it was a bit before. And we raised $10,000, and we gave away T-shirts.
I mean, there's some other interesting people doing some very interesting things about crowdsourcing in a different way, like this filmmaker, Chris Watson, I think, who did a film called A Little Bit Zombie. He basically sold frames of his film, one frame at a time, and there was a value attached to that frame. And it was he set up a website so that everybody would donate to that website. and he controlled all the money coming in. He set up a PayPal account and all that stuff, and all the money came to him that way. And they actually bought a frame. They could buy as many frames of the film as they wanted to. But he raised a significant amount of money to make his movie that way. And I mean, there's all kinds of people doing all kinds of interesting things in that kind of way, and avoiding the whole Indiegogo and Kickstarter and stuff. Because, you know, with Indiegogo or Kickstarter, you are giving up some percentages to, you know, to do that. And he was completely in control of the website. He could keep the fundraising going for as long as he wanted to. There was no deadlines or whatever. And he used the website also to update his fans about what was going on with the film. No, that's. I talked to the producer about it a couple weeks ago, and there's they may have found a way around it. He's been dancing around it pretty good so far, so they might get away with it. Well, because he can't. He wouldn't do it again until the new ruling comes down because of the fight that they've had to go through to get to where they're at right now. And the original advice that they got was that it was going to be okay, and then they go and do it, and then they find out later after they're starting to do their tax credit audits that they have to, yeah.
You know, just in the discussing of financing and opportunities and stuff, I think there's a good example that I've been hearing about more and more. Heard about it again last night. Just with your MTS model, and I know Cam Bennett is here, and how that money is being used to go back to local filmmakers and just financing and seeding and supporting. And I think regional ideas, Murray's here from Knowledge Network if people want to get to know him. And the part of this, I think, is also the local communities, the organizations of the filmmakers, of the creators, of the producers, especially in the indie spirit, have to be strong and organized and work together to push for some of the models. There's a lot of money going into film financing, government money, and I think the lobby needs to consider how that's evolving and push back and make sure that there's money available for independent and local production. And so I think that's a good model, and or a good accomplishment. And I'm sure that y'all probably worked hard to make sure that you brainwashed Cam so that when he got a job, that this happened. And I think it's important. I want to thank all the panelists and everyone for coming. And feel free to introduce yourselves and talk to us as the day goes on, or buy us drinks, as you wish.